सर मैं गाँव आया हूँ वैसे इसलिए,
हाँ
सर कल शादी है।
ओके ओके।
श्लोक अर्थ। जो विद्या की देवी भगवती सरस्वती कुंद के फूल, चंद्रमा, हिम राशि और मोती के हाथ की तरह धवल वर्ण की है, और जो श्वेत वस्त्र धारण करती है, जिनके हाथ में वीणा दंड शोभयमान है, जिन्होंने श्वेत
Ajay sir,
कमलों
mute
पर
yourself.
आसन
Ajay
ग्रहण
sir.
किया है, तथा ब्रह्मा, विष्णु एवं शंकर आदि देवताओं द्वारा जो सदा पूजित है, वही संपूर्ण जड़ता और अज्ञान को दूर कर देने वाली माँ सरस्वती हमारी रक्षा करें।
Thank you, Ms. Divya. Now, I would like to invite our dignified chief invitee of the day, the Dr. Aditya Tripathi. He is the assistant professor at Department of Commerce, Shyamlal College Evening. He has more than 15 years of teaching experience and he is gold medalist in MCOM. He has published 15 research papers in international and national journal. Beside, he has also presented more than 15 papers in seminars and conferences. He is the editor of College Journal Aspirer and member of many journal editorial boards. And besides, Sir has also handled various committees, administrative responsibilities such as Dean, Convener of IQAC and AAC Placement Cell, etc. And he contains the nuances of marketing and skill development strategy. So I would like to invite Sir, please enlighten our young souls.
Thank you so much, Ajay, for giving a warm welcome to me. And I'm really blessed to be part of this lecture series, which is one of the most innovative, activity of the college. In the history of this college, this Department of History has made a historical step. I must say, and I must acknowledge, I don't have any hesitation in putting it on record that this is one of the best or innovative kind of idea, which I don't think that any of the colleges of Delhi University has. So, with this very warm good evening to one and all present here. Uh, First of all, I would like to congratulate the convener and the chief architect of this innovative and much needed talk series that is called GSTS, Graduate Scholar Talk Series, Dr. Manish Karamwar sir, for
Thank you, sir. Thank
really
you.
inculcating this idea, bringing this noble idea of, listening to young minds, listening to young speakers, giving them a very strong platform for deliberation, discussion, and exchange of thoughts. So my sincere thanks to Dr. Manish Karamwar sir, coordinators Dr. D.N. Singh, Dr. Pramod Kumar sir from the Department of History, office bearers of Saksha, that is Society of Department of History, which is actually very much vibrant and it is visible here. President Mr. Ankit, Vice President Ms. Mandira Paul, Secretary Mr. Shubham Tiwari, Joint Secretary Ms. Preeti, and Treasurer Ms. Chandni Sikarwar. Some of the members are not present here, so in absentia, I'm addressing them. GSTS coordinators, Ms. Manvi Saraswat, Mr. Saurabh Singh, Mr. Modit Bharadwaj, Mr. Ajay Kumar, and Mr. Vishesh Kashmi. And star of the event, and obviously the speaker of the day, Ms. Archana Bharti, who has chosen a very innovative topic to for addressing us today. I really feel privileged and honored to be invited for making the inaugural session of this, for marking this inaugural session of this innovative initiative by Department of History. And I'm very glad to know that it is 12th in series. It means since February we have been continuing this legacy of organizing these scholar series of lectures without any fail. So the topic of today's discussion, which is informed to me, is maintaining peace is a marathon. And basically, we belong to a country where we have been knowing for peace, war also, but obviously we know we are known for Mahabharata, we are known for Gandhi, we are known for Mahatma Buddha also. So maintaining peace is really a marathon. It's a long journey of patience, perseverance, and commitment. Peace or war, basically, to my mind, I would only take two more minutes of yours and just to share my idea because I'm a person of accounting and finance marketing, so I hardly know about the literature and all. But still, I would like to share my ideas. Peace or war, basically, it's a choice for us to make. Whether we have global peace or global war, actually, it is up to us at every moment. The situation is not hopeless and out of our hands. It is very much in our hands to decide whether we want peace or we want war. If we don't do anything, who will? The question comes, if we don't think, we don't do, who is going to do all this for the peace, for spreading the peace? Peace or war is actually our decision. And the fundamental goal, to my mind, of humanity is peace. Not only peace in this world, but peace in all worlds. We should not confine ourselves to Indian scenario only. When we talk about the world, कहते हैं ना कि हमारा संसार है और आपका संसार है. We should talk about all worlds. Wherever human beings are there, we should maintain peace. And the Buddha taught that the first step on the path to peace is understanding the causality of peace. What is the cause of peace? When we understand what causes peace, we know where to direct our efforts. No matter how vigorously we stir a boiling pot of soup on a fire. I would like to recite this example, which I read somewhere. No matter how vigorously we stir a boiling pot of soup on a fire, the soup will not cool unless we remove the pot from the fire. Once we do so, it will cool on its own, and our stirring will hasten the process. Stirring causes the soup to cool, but only if we first remove the soup from the fire. So until and unless we are actually removing that cause of getting this situation like war, we cannot eliminate the war. In other words, I can say that we can take many actions in our quest for peace that may be helpful, and we should try to at least contribute our bit. We should not think that my contribution is very small or I cannot contribute to a greater extent. We should try to contribute in our own manner. But if we do not first address the fundamental issues, all other actions will come to naught. The Buddha taught the peaceful minds lead to peaceful speech and peaceful actions. If the minds of living beings are at peace, the entire world will be at peace. Who has a mind at peace? Now you decide who has a mind at peace. The overwhelming majority of us live in the mid of mental, trauma that subside only the brief and treasured moments. You could probably count on the fingers of both the hands, the number of those rare, holy, persons whose minds are truly and permanently at peace. Are we going to wait for the entire world to become sages? Do we think that maintaining peace is only a task of a saint or a sage? No. What chance is there of a peaceful world if we are thinking like this? I would not be wrong if I recite, the efforts of even our, the gods to whom we pray. Like Hanumanji went to Ravan and said, "Pranatapal Lagunayaka Karuna Sindhu Kharari Gaye Sharan Prabhu Rakhi Hain Tab Aparadh Visare." So Hanumanji was praying to Ravan that please don't do anything wrong. Even if today you return Sita Mata to Ramchandra, he will forgive you. So to my mind, forgiveness is the best remedy, best way to maintain the peace. And without a further ado, I would like speaker to come to the fore and speak about the topic. With these words, I'm putting end to my welcome address. I once again welcome you all to this forum. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you a lot for your such enlightened and kind words. So before just getting started to our main event, I would like to say that please be safe and be at your homes, because we are in between the pandemic and we have to unite in this cause and be literally peaceful in this war against the corona. Because जिंदगी जहमत है, खुदा की रहमत है, विलादतें कई मगर इंसान है तो जिंदगी दिखा कुछ बंदगी दिखा. So we should be very peaceful in this war. With that note, I would like to call Miss Archana Bharti, who is a student of History and Political Science, first year BA program. She will be going to recite her topic about why maintaining peace is a marathon. So I would like to call Miss Archana Bharti to have the stage and to present her views.
Good evening to everyone present here. I, Archana Bharti, a student of Shamlal College, BA program first year, is going to be the speaker of today's topic. The topic is Maintaining Peace is a Marathon. The objectives are: number one, wars in history. Number 2, how is war justified? Number 3, when will you treat soldiers as humans? Number 4, the struggle for peace. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. A slogan that contradicts itself, a paradox that creates confusion. This slogan is from 1984, a book by George Orwell. And Orwell writes it to be one of the three slogans of English Socialist Party of Oceania. The goal of the party is to achieve total control over the people, more importantly, over their minds. The slogan, war is peace, is used to make the people believe that even though they're in a constant state of war, they should act like there is peace. Freedom is slavery also acts as a subconscious discouragement for anyone who might consider seeking freedom, while the last part of the slogan, ignorance is strength, encourages the people to accept as fact everything the party tells them without rational thinking, believe, and never question. The Orwellian slogan applies to a society. Even in a corrupted semi-democracy like ours, it is hard to believe that paradoxes like war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is friends could make any sense, but they do. War has always been there. It is a cold hard fact. The first wars that I can remember is the Greco-Persian Wars. It started around 499 BC and lasted until 449 BC. At those times, it was considered glorious to die for one's country. Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori, a line from the Odes by the Roman lyric poet Horace. It translates, it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. It might be true, of course, for a soldier who sees his comrades lose their lives, who is constantly plagued by nightmares, who always wakes up in the morning with the thought that he might die today. It must be a glorious achievement. Now, let's skip past some centuries. The year 1914, day 28 July. The world saw the events of the First World War. By November 1918, when the war ended, there were more than 16 million casualties. American President Woodrow Wilson said that it was a war to end all wars, a war that will make the world safe for democracy. But with millions of people dead who actually saw the end of that war, the view of people who actually witnessed the war was far different than what was propagated by the politicians. Nurse Vera Brittain, in a memoir, wrote, I wish those people who talk about going on with this war, whatever it costs, who see the soldiers suffering from mustard gas poisoning, great mustard-colored blisters, blind eyes, all sticky and stuck together, always fighting for breath with voices a merry whisper, saying that their throats are closing and they know they will choke. Does this look like a person who is willingly sacrificing himself for some half-corrupted democracy? The answer is no. Like Hemingway said, war, no matter how necessary or how justified, is an inhuman crime. And still, even after seeing the mass bloodshed, we entered the Second World War. World War II was said to be a late after effect of World War I. It's ironic how a war that was fought to end all wars was another war, with of course, again, millions of casualties. Not only soldiers, but civilians too were burned in the crossfire. Do you still say that war is justified? A 6 years long war from 1939 to 1945. Imagine being a soldier stuck in that war. Even if you survive it till the end, your hands will be so stained and red that there will be nothing left except the feel of a gun. Now imagine being a child. Who do you think goes to fight when all able men dies? It's the children. Children 10 to 15 years old are handed a gun and asked to shoot. Now let me ask you a question. When the next war comes, are you ready to send your child? There is also another chillingly horrifying truth. Women are treated like objects in war. I don't know how the next war will be fought or how the war after it. Nor do I wish to know. But from history, I can confirm that women, in order to survive, were forced to give up their chastity. Are you ready to do that again? So which country won and which country lost? Okay. For a moment, let's assume that war is fought for a reason and it is necessary. But what kind of reason can it be? The first justified war comes from the mythological epic Mahabharata, the Dharma Yudh. The philosophy of just war theorizes what aspects of war are justifiable according to morally acceptable principles. These principles are just authority, just cause, right intention, and last resort. Now that we know what a just war is, let's come out of mythology and look at reality. From the era of before Christ to the present time, which war can you call it a justified war? The answer is none. Human avarice is the only morality that can be seen in war. There are other excuses too, like a war for peace, or a war for religion, or a war for freedom. But what good is freedom when there is no one with you to be a free man? How can religion, which teaches you to be kind and merciful, cause bloodshed and death? The partition of India can also be called as a minor war, a war based on religious ideologies. But how will a corpse tell you his religion? Are you going to search for some kind of mark on his body? If not, how will you decide to burn him or bury him? The infamous Civil War in the United States left 2.4 million soldiers killed and the South in utter ruin. The reason? Abolishment of slavery, end of discrimination based on color. Now tell me, where is the morality in this war? The truth is, in war, morality is tilted according to the needs of those who instigate it. The most absurd reason that is given to justify a war is a war for peace, a preemptive war, and a preventive war. But what we forget is that the soldier who is going to fight that war, no matter what name you give to it, does not want it. It's illogical that we're trying to stop a war before the war has actually started. But then again, has war ever been logical? William Tecumseh Sherman said, "It is only those who have neither fired a shot nor heard the shrieks and groans of the wounded actually cry out for blood, more vengeance, more destruction." It is easy for those who die in war, but those who are burdened with the responsibility to be alive, life is nothing but hell. We teach our soldiers to fight, to hold a gun, to throw a grenade, to be courageous and die for the country. But when? When have they ever been taught to return? And what of those prisoners of war? The mental and physical torture that they receive leaves deep impacts. And if they're lucky enough to survive, they're plagued by constant nightmares and insomnia. Kurt Vonnegut, an author, a prisoner of war, writes in his book Slaughterhouse 5. People aren't supposed to look back. It shouldn't matter where all those dead soldiers were or where their houses had been. And for doing that, one must become acquainted with death. But how do we do something this difficult? Can you ever get over something so traumatic? The veterans of war who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder say that they never get over it. These soldiers, they go to war full of hope and return full of hate. War surely ends with the victory of one's country and the loss of other. But do they ever come out of that battlefield? Herodotus, in his book Histories, wrote, "No one is fool enough to choose war instead of peace. In peace, sons bury fathers, but in war, father buries sons." The greatest threat to mankind and all of life on this beautiful planet is not climate change, terrorism, overpopulation, or resource scarcity. No, the greatest threat to mankind is the same today as it was over 1,000 years ago. We are ruled over by parasitical psychopaths who plunge us into war, manipulate us against each other, flood our minds with fear, hate, bigotry, and ignorance with every chance they get. How far? How far are you willing to lose your humanity for the future of humankind? The consequences of war go far beyond the battlefield. There are a number of books addressed to the effects of war, like the World Bank Report, the United Nations book, and the United Nations Children's Fund document. War destroys communities and families and often disrupts the development of the social and economic fabric of nations. Death as a result of war is simply the tip of the iceberg. Other consequences beside death, like endemic poverty, malnutrition, disability, economic or social decline, and psychological illness are one among of them. The Cold War that came after the Second World War crashed the Wall Street and plunged the world's economy. The after effect of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombing was felt for a decade. There is no victory or loss in war, only massacre. However, the good news is that there have not been any major wars since the Second World War, though minor conflicts still arise. Like in the 22 countries of the Eastern Mediterranean region, where over 80% of the population has experienced conflicts in the last quarter of century. This happens because people refuse to compromise. But you might ask, what's so devastating about these minor things? People still die, right? Vonnegut, in his book Slaughterhouse-Five, also writes, there would always be wars. They were as easy to stop as glaciers. And even if wars didn't keep coming like glaciers, there would still be plain old death. And I agree, death is the eternal truth of life. But I'm not so shameless as to send my brethren in a death ahead of time. I shall die, but that is all I shall do for death. I shall also not view death as patriotic. There is no such death as a glorious one. War is hell, and death is death. So just stop. Stop counting human lives in numbers. There were not 60 million casualties. There were 60 million dead people. Stop. Stop before you fight a war with artificial intelligence and mutated humans on Moon and Mars. The fate of future lies in the present. Like John F. Kennedy said, we must end war before it brings an end to all of mankind. And. Now the good news. We are on a path to end war, the path of non-violence and peace. But non-violence is not easy. How do you deal with extreme violence without using force in return? If asked in a simpler way, how do I deal with a bully without becoming a thug in return? Making peace is never easy. It's like a marathon. You run 1 kilometer, then you run 5 kilometers, and then you run for miles. Violence, on the other hand, is like a short 100-meter run. That's why it looks easier. But a marathon is what brings people together. May El Khalil, a sportswoman from Lebanon, is an advocate of peace. Coming from a country fragmented in civil war of politics and religion, she strived to achieve peace through a marathon. She organized a marathon with over 60,000 people under the campaign United We Run. Thus, in an ever-fragile and unstable part of the world, she found hope and cooperation for peace. Very rarely does more violence works for violence. Nelson Mandela went to jail believing in violence, and 27 years later, he and his colleagues had slowly, carefully honed the skills, the incredible skills that they needed to turn one of the most vicious governments the world has known into a democracy. And they did it in a total devotion to non-violence. They realized that using force against force doesn't work. One of my personal inspiration is Aung San Suu Kyi of Burma. She was leading a group of students on a protest in the streets of Rangoon. They came around a corner, faced with a row of machine guns, and she realized straight away that the soldiers with their fingers shaking on the triggers were more scared than the student protesters behind her. But she told the students to sit down, and she walked with such calm and such clarity and such total lack of fear that she could walk right up to the first gun, put her hand on it, and lower it. And no one got killed. The last century was top-down power. It was still government telling people what to do. This century, there's a shift. It's bottom-up power. It's people joining up with people from miles away to bring about change. The kind of change that starts with demobilizing militias, rebuilding economies, resettling refugees, even liberating child soldiers. The US counter-terrorism policy has been to kill any insurgents at almost any cost, and if civilians get in the way, that's written as collateral damage. And this is so infuriating and humiliating for the people of Afghanistan that it makes recruitment for Al-Qaeda very easy. When people are so disgusted by, for example, burning of the Quran. But the US military is now beginning to become aware. One example is of US military general Chris Hughes. He was leading his men down the streets of Najaf in Iraq, and suddenly people were pouring out of the houses on either side of the road, screaming, yelling, furiously angry. And they surrounded these very young troops, were completely terrified, didn't know what was going on, couldn't speak Arabic. And Chris Hughes strode in the middle of the ground and commanded, "Kneel." And these soldiers, with their heavy backpacks and wobbling knees, got down. And then it became silent. And everyone started going back. Stefan Wolf, an ethnic conflict scholar, shows that in the last 20 years, wars and conflicts have steadily decreased. We now see an overall decline in the number of civil wars since the Cold War, with the estimate being as less as 30%. The overall trend in the killing of soldiers and civilians decreased in the last 2 decades. In his research, Wolf lays down methods to achieve peace, that is, leadership, diplomacy, and institutional design. Take the example of Northern Ireland. Despite the decade-long violence, 1998 saw the end to it through politician Senator George Mitchell. He was committed to find ways of peaceful negotiations. He was also aided by international organizations like the United Nations. More importantly, this was not a one-man's job. Local leaders, though late and a bit unenthusiastic, did rose up to compromise and maintain peace. The struggle for peace can also be seen when civil war ended in Liberia in 2003, full-scale war prevented in Macedonia in 2001, or the successful ending of conflict in Aceh in Indonesia in 2005. In all these three cases, local leaders were willing and able to make peace. International community stood ready to help them negotiate and implemented an agreement, and the institutions have lived up on the promise they held on the day they were agreed. Thus, the fundamental for peace can be found in, first, leadership. Leadership needs to be capable, determined, and visionary in its commitment to peace. Second, diplomacy. Diplomacy needs to be well resourced, sustained, and should include all. It must ensure an equitable compromise and a broad composition between local, national, and international supporters. Third, institutional design. It depends on issues, innovative ideas, and well implemented methods. But the important question is, as individuals, what can we do? The answer is practically nothing. What could be done and always have been done in history is by people who are organized. The labor movements, civil rights movements, women's movement, anti-war movement, or environmental movement, these can do things. That is why at the end, it all comes down to leaders. Leaders like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Ashoka, Buddha. Leaders that are committed towards peace and those that people are willing to follow, even if it requires making hard choices. So, you started. Let the revolution start from you. Peace is not impossible. It's happening everywhere now. You don't believe me? Why and how? So many dictatorships have collapsed over the last 30 years. Dictatorships in Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Mali, Madagascar, Poland, the Philippines, Serbia, Slovenia, and now Estonia and Egypt. A lot of it is due to a book by Gene Sharp called From Dictatorship to Democracy. In this, he wrote 81 methodologies for non-violent resistance, and it's being used everywhere by everyone. They have made it so that peace can be achieved with effective ways. No, they are not saints. They are just decent people, and we need more and more of them because they're still child soldiers instead of children. So let us be alert in a twofold sense. Since Auschwitz concentration camp, we know what man is capable of, and since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Archana, for your such a enlightening talk. The way the way you mirrored your thoughts was very nice, and it was really amazing, Archana. And most important thing is starting, you were very clear with your objectives. It was really fantastic. So everybody knows. So I hope you feel better now, and because it's a great opportunity for the first year student, like they will participate and give their views in any topic, and like the way you told, war has always been there from the era of before Christ to the present era. Everybody knows small conflicts still arise, which quickly escalate to the minor wars. There's in times like the making of peace may seem like an idealistic dream, and people, maintaining peace can be like a marathon. It takes willpower, cooperation, and stamina to go through an arduously long journey. So I think all of you know violence on the other hand is like a short 100-meter run, and that's why it look easy. But a marathon is what brings people together. So it is difficult, it is possible to make and maintaining peace. Thank you so much, Archana. So moreover, without further ado, moving on, we have some questions in chat box section from our enthusiastic listeners. So first one is from Shubham Tiwari. He is asking Archana, how do international organizations help in preventing war? Archana, what's your views on this?
Of course, the international organizations are a main role in maintaining the peace, because internationally, like the international organizations, like the most important one, United Nations, and if economically we view the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, they bring different countries to one platform. And when joining, the countries pledge that they would not strike war against each other. And the international organization also maintain the number of arms and ammunitions of the country that are participated in it. And they also maintain that the countries that are in it, that joins the international organizations, the people of that country are well fed and the government is acting properly. So if the people are happy and satisfied, then why do we need to go to war?
Fantastic, Archana. Thank you. You have told very well. I hope Shubham Tiwari, your doubt is clear now. So now next question is from Saurav Singh. He is asking, what are your thoughts, Archana, regarding economic war? Will we see economic war in the coming times? Archana, how can you justify this answer?
As I said, that war has been present for a long time, and I cannot be an idealistic and just say that war will not be there in the future. But we are in the present time where we are trying to achieve peace, and we have achieved, of course, since we have not seen any major world wars. So if we are talking about economic wars, it can be possible. Of course, I have not seen the future, so I cannot say that it will be totally impossible. It can be possible, but we hope that the leaders that are present up above, they will do something so that people of any country, not only India, but people of any country like China, our neighbors country, no one gets suffered.
Very good, Archana. I think he would understand. So now, next question is from Manisha Verma. She is asking, do you think it is possible to have a world without war? Archana, can I repeat? She is
No, I
asking.
understood.
Okay.
Yes. War, I have clearly justified in my speech that war will always be there, of course, but it depends. There will be major wars or minor wars. Like I can give the example of conflicts that are still going right now. And for example, in 2008, just we remember, in Sri Lanka, there was 10,000 people almost died in a war between minorities and majority, the Tamil minority and the Sinhalese majority. So of course, if we see from an idealistic point of view, from a poet's point of view, then we all hope that war will not be there. But various types of war, different wars, minor wars or small conflicts will always be there. But like I said, leadership, diplomacy, and institutional design. If we focus on all three parts and from all over the world, it takes everyone together, then we hope that there will not be any war in the future.
Thank you, Archana. Now there is one more question from Divya Tyagi. She is asking, do you think peace will ever be established? Do you yourself hope that? Archana.
I am being an optimistic over here, and as I am the future generation, I will achieve peace through my own methods. I want to become a leader. Those leaders that I have given examples of, I want to be like them. And if my determination and my willpower spreads to everyone present here, then we will have more leaders. And of course, it's like a chain. It's going to spread, and at the end, it will connect the world.
Thank you, Archana. Thank you so
Preeti,
much.
Preeti,
Yes,
would
sir.
you like to take another question
Yes, sir.
from
Yes, sir.
Mr. Naved? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. एक second. हाँ. So Archana, there is one more question from Navid Sharma. He is asking, in 2017, hundreds and thousands of Rohingyas fled to neighboring in Bangladesh due to rape, murder, and possible genocide that was committed by the government of Myanmar along with its army, headed by your inspiration, Miss Suu Kyi. Your comments on that, Archana?
I beg your pardon, I'm not able to understand the question.
Can I repeat?
No. It's okay.
Yes,
It's okay.
please.
It's okay.
Okay, okay,
Preeti,
okay.
go ahead. She will give this answer anyway in the other way. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sir. Sir, questions. So excellent, Archana. You have beautifully answered all the questions. Now I call Mr. Ajay for further proceeding. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Preeti, and thank you, Ms. Archana Bharti. You have just tackled everything very fine at such a young age. Being a first year and a first semester student was such a commendable job. You done a great job. And so, moving further, I would like to call Mr. Ankit, who is a third year student in Shamlal College Evening. He is going to be the speaker next Sunday. Mr. Ankit, please come and brief your topic that what you going to be announced the next Sunday, what views you will going to present in front of our listeners on the next Sunday. Kindly brief that.
Thank you, Ajay. Good evening, respected teachers, my dear friends and juniors. My name is Ankit from BA program third year. In upcoming JSTC 13, I would like to present a paper on extended family, intimacy, and courtship in
अंकित
Europe.
अपनी आवाज ठीक कीजिए.
Sir, audible? Sir, audible?
Mr. Ankit, your voice
Yes,
is
yes.
still breaking. Just you can proceed. You can proceed. You can.
Sir, audible? I'm audible.
Yes, you can. You can. You just continue with the topic.
Good evening, respected teachers, my dear friends and my juniors. My name is Ankit from BA program third year. In upcoming JSTC 13, I would like to present a paper on extended family, intimacy, and courtship in Europe. मतलब यूरोप में विस्तृत परिवार और अंतरंगता और
अंकित,
प्रेम
आपकी
संबंध.
आवाज क्लियर नहीं है. अजय, you may go. You may proceed now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I think Mr. Ankit's voice is not clear, but I have a bit idea, bits and pieces idea about his topic. His topic is related to the Europe and the condition of women and other things, social condition there. As far as I got to know, but he would be telling you the next Sunday the complete one. I cannot claim it. So I think so. Now I would like to call Mr. Dr. Aditya sir again to just brief the entire episode, the entire proceedings that we had done today. What is his views on the today's talk? And kindly brief, sir, in a quick brief. Can we have this?
Yes, thank you, Ajay. Thank you so much. And first of all, let me congratulate Ms. Archana Bharti for the wonderful, coverage of the topic. And she has done justice with the topic. What we were expecting from her to speak, she has actually delivered the same. And she has wonderfully taken the questions and answers as well. But I would like to, touch upon the broad contours of, the lecture, the deliberations which Archana has made. I would like to summarize what she has spoken because she has wonderfully contributed in today's lecture series. When she was speaking about this, maintaining peace, she has cited, different examples from the literature also. And she was she has actually classified her lecture with certain objectives, which I could make out. First was what is there into the history as far as the war is concerned. So she was talking about the death. The death is something which is inevitable. It has to come. But what about the premature death and all, and whether we should go for accepting it? What will be the result of war? So she was just trying to showcase wars in the historically what has been the situation of war, the kind of war we have faced, and how we find war to be justified, the kind of justification people were giving who were in favor of war. because whenever there was a war, there were two parties, and obviously if one is the winner, another has to lose. But during this entire what to say, the disposition of war, what was happening, many people, many families, they lost the valuable lives of their family members. And not only the lives, the entire generation was put to suffer. So in that way, the justification of war was also highlighted by her. She also talked about how to treat soldiers. What are our expectations, that whether we were treating those soldiers as human being or not. And then obviously she also tried to explain about the struggle for peace. But before talking about struggle for peace, let me point out that the point number three, which she was trying to elaborate, was what was the treatment which was met out to those soldiers who were actually fighting for the cause, who were actually falling prey to the whims and fancies of somebody. Some king is actually, if we talk about monarchy, some king is there, they have to fight a war. And what about that soldier? Without even giving a second thought to it, whether I'll be losing my life or what kind of misery my family is going to face, then to those soldiers, they were suffering, they were struggling. And she has very beautifully placed the inhumanity, or you can say the human rights aspect of those soldiers, who were actually part of these wars. Because wars, whenever there was a war, obviously on both the sides soldiers were there, so they were the key players. And while talking about the struggle for peace, because most of the propagators of war, they were giving a justification for war, that since we want to maintain peace, that is why there is a war. But we were forgetting that what is the cost of that peace. And that has wonderfully been explained by Archana. So I once again congratulate her. And she has also highlighted one more thing, that in times like making of peace, it may seem idealistic dream to some people, but obviously maintaining peace can be a marathon, and obviously it's a long run process. It takes a lot of time, and patience and perseverance to maintain peace. So peace is not a kind of something which you go in the market and you buy. No, you cannot buy peace. Peace is actually, when we talk about peace is we indicate towards mental peace. We talk about the peace in atmosphere, the kind of livelihood those people will get after that this when the war is over. And the cost of every war, if we talk about now I'll be coming to the world war. What is the cost of that war which we are actually witnessing? War is there, and it doesn't mean that one party is a winner, another is a loser. You need to understand that entire generation is going to bear that cost of war. And if we look at the world war, we can find what has been happening in at least I can vouch about the World War II. And you can witness the creation of United Nations in 1945 with the motive. And they actually came with this idea that since the entire resources were devastated after the Second World War, there was only one mission with United Nations, that is to maintain the international peace and security. So the only objective behind this establishment of United Nations is to ensure that we are maintaining peace. And we are trying to, the name of World Bank itself was not World Bank. It was International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Since I'm a person of commerce and management, I can add by saying that the establishment of IBRD, that is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, was to reconstruct the entire world for the humanity, so that the countries which has been the sufferer, they can find the ways to ensure that the entire humanity is getting a peaceful place to live in. Now, I would also like to say that to talk about the peacekeeping agencies, the kind of peacekeeping act which is actually performed by the United Nations, and it has proven to be one of the most effective tools available to the UN. and the objective of that is to assist countries, to navigate the difficult path from conflict to peace. So there is a journey from conflict to peace, and for that UN is actually working. And now the role of this peacekeeping is multidimensional, and they are called upon not only to maintain peace and security, but also to facilitate political processes, protect civilians, assist in disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration of former combatants. So the role of this United Nations has become very prominent, and that makes the topic of Archana to be more relevant and prominent as on date. So you can say that what she has spoken today is actually of immense relevance and importance. And if you talk about the United Nations peacekeeping operations, region wise, in African region you can find UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara. You can find UN's multidimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali. You can find, if we talk about the Asia and the Pacific, you can find UN military observer group in India and Pakistan, because we are having a lot of tension over the border, and for that UN has a military observer group in India and Pakistan. If we talk about Europe, they have a UN interim administration mission in Kosovo. They have also a peacekeeping force in Cyprus. If we talk about Middle East, they have United Nations disengagement observer force, and many more. So what I could witness from this talk was that Archana has wonderfully covered everything, and we must congratulate, we must clap for her. A wonderful presentation. So I'm honored to be part of it. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Thanks Manish sir for inviting me here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Your opinions, thoughts, and everything really matters to us as a team. And thank you for being with us for such a long time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Now,
Ajay.
moving ahead, I would like to invite Mr. Shubham to give the vote of thanks and to conclude the meeting today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rajas. So it was really a very fantastic talk today. So good evening, everyone. I am Shubham Tiwari, a BA program second year student and secretary of History Society Shakshya, Department of History, Shyamlal College Evening. The Department of History, under the convenership of Dr. D.N. Singh and guidance of Dr. Manish Karamwar and Pramod Kumar, has achieved new heights during the session of 2016 and 17. And for the first time, the Department of History formed its society, Sakshya. Sakshya organized various programs like quizzes, debates, lecture series, seminar, career counseling, and educational trips. Last year, Sakshya organized Freshers Welcome and Orientation program and also conducted its OBE seminar through online mode on the Google Meet platform. Also, it has successfully completed its 12 GSTS program today. So as a proud member of this society, I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this memorable program. So first and foremost, I would like to thank our today's special guest, Dr. Aditya sir, for his thoughtful and interesting address. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. I would like to express my deep gratitude to Dr. D.N. Singh sir and the GSTS convener, Dr. Manish Karamwar sir, for the valuable support and motivation. Also, I am grateful to the teachers who had joined us today and made this program success through their continuous love and support. Dr. Dharma Rawat ma'am, Dr. Ajay Kumar sir, Dr. Sima Meena ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. Further, a big thanks to our today's speaker, Ms. Archana Bharti, for adoring her necessary work and make our evening such an informative one. I offer my sincere thanks to the member of Shakshya and GSTS team who ran around all these things and present this program every Sunday with enthusiasm. Last but not the least, I would like to place my heartily thanks to all the students of various departments for joining us today. Once again, thank you all for being with us. Have a great day ahead. See you all next Sunday. Take care.
Thank you all. Thank you. So kindly leave this session. The session is over. Thank you, Aditya sir. Thank you, DN sir. Okay, and all my students. A great
Thank you, sir.
a great day. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
No,
Bye bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. DN sir. So kindly leave.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aditya sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And well done, Archana. It's a fantastic. Everyone. and everyone joining outside from my college. Thank you, everyone. Aditi, Manisa, Poonam, Pooja, Palvi, Priti, Purnima Goswami, Reena. So thank you very much for joining. I think you people are enjoying. Huh?
Yes, sir. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you,
Yes,
sir.
thank you, Poonam. Uh, uh, Keep coming. So my young students are uh, believe about some presenting some good ideas. Okay, thank you. So kindly leave because I'm the last to leave this meeting because I have started this meeting. So kindly start
Thank you,
leaving.
sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sir.
Okay, Poonam.
Okay,
Okay,
sir.
Pooja.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you, Preeti.
Good evening, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisa, for your question also. Huh? It's good. Good.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Ashish, Mandira, Aradhya. Can you leave this session? Thank you, Priyanka. Sweta, thank you. Rita also, thank you.